Hi, it's Chris with Implied Music. And today I'd like to take a look at a sometimes neglected part of a composer's toolkit. I'm talking about sustained sounds, tones and sounds that go on for a while, a minute longer. As an ambient composer, this is something I think about a lot. Let's look at how composers work with it, how sound developers have solved some of the problems. Let's jump in. Well, I'm really interested in ambient music, as many of you know, and so I think about sustained sounds a lot. Probably the single most important thing about a sustained sound as a composer is to have some agency over it, to have some control over the sound, and to have a kind of a sense of evolving picture of the sound. There are numerous composers that have done wonderful work with this. We'll talk about them as we hop in. But let's take a look at some of the libraries that I use to support long, continuous tones. So to begin with, let's take a look at some sample libraries. From SonicCouture, Geosonics has 3 samples running at the same time. In this case, we have a couple of tonal samples, the organ flutes and the string sustain, matched with an actual recording of a forest fire of some kind. And that's the Geosonics magic. There's tons of fascinating environmental recordings that mix with tonal things. Listen to this. There's also an algorithmic sort of thing going on in the background with the flute. You can see the animation happening on this 3D grid, and I could actually record this move if I'd like. And there's a lot going on while still giving the impression of a fairly sustained state. Most of these sample libraries that we'll look at will be working with just that kind of thing. This one is called Arkis. It's from Orchestral Tools, and Arkis does something really quite wonderful. It takes the same idea of several samples and allowing us to mix them together, sustained sounds, and it gives us some control. Using the mod wheel, I can swell in sounds. These are beautifully recorded samples, and Arkis has tons of interesting effects. Not just pads, I'm kind of using pads here, but things that have quite a bit of motion. I'll show you what I mean. Do you hear how the trilling of the horns actually creates a bit of a rhythm? This type of orchestral texture has been explored very effectively by the composers like John Luther Adams, who create big, wide sound fields out of orchestras. I do love this sound an awful lot, and it's great if what you're looking for is something that's tonal, that's going to sit underneath a melody or vocal, something like that. Arkis is a great, great library. Another library that uses the same approach is Orbit, and here it's very clear. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4 sample sets, and really, it's a terrific sounding instrument. It's got some really sort of good filters and tricks, and you can get some nice choppy things as well. Right now we're in kind of our flow state. And again, tons of excellent presets. Just for giggles, for those of you who like this kind of thing. great pulses, right? And over here, check this out. See where it says random? I can roll the dice on the sounds. We'll get different sounds and different filter effects. Same notes. You really can do this all day. I do love Orbit. While we're talking about pulses, let's look at signal. Now, this is actually designed as a pulse generator, and you can tone all that stuff down, but same deal. Here, check it. We've got these macros here assigned to sliders. Real-time control. Love it. The rhythm changes, phase and grit changes. It's really good when you add it to drums as a background texture for things. They also do some other, it's from Output, by the way. They do some other wonderful libraries. They're all kind of like one note, I'm a genius type libraries, but you know, it's hard to complain. All right, so I've been sort of saving this for last. In order to play Equator, which is from Rolly, and of course you guys are probably familiar with Rolly, I like to use this instrument, this keyboard in front of me. It's the Seaboard Rise 49, and it has a continuous even surface that allows me to do a bunch of expressive moves. That was just an extreme example. It's not really a steady state, is it? But let's say I just take a simple chord like this big D major chord. As I press, I can bring out individual notes because the notes are polyphonically expressive, MPE. I can change the pitch of an individual note. I can open and close a filter. What that means is I could get, say, a complicated chord, something like this. And just sit on it, changing pressure and slight pitch variations. And get a really interesting, constantly evolving background sound. And this is the world that I like to live in when I'm building my music. I have a favorite composer in this style, in the electronic world. His name is Locsil, and I'm just going to recommend him, Loscil. Not a very well-known composer, really, at all. But what a great producer. What a great producer. I'll link to him down below. Well, I've made a lot of great patches for myself in Equator. And you can also use the Seaboard Rise to play contact instruments as long as you build them in multis. It's sending out several MIDI channels with continuous controller data on every channel. So it's a complicated, slightly difficult to manage stream of data. You have to have a fairly powerful computer if you don't want everything to choke right up. Well, the human brain is keen to have sustained sounds around it. The world has continuous sound. There's no way to get away from it. And composers, I think, really have a responsibility to adapt to that truth and to not only kind of adapt to it, but embrace it, to use it to our advantage. There's a kind of a serenity to it, isn't there? And for me, I'm aware that there's a paradox because I play essentially a percussion instrument, the piano. I play a note and it just eventually goes away. I love playing organ, but the same type of thing. It's kind of, whenever you have something that's on or off, you create a polarity, a duality. Whereas if you just live in a space, there's a sense of truth that begins to evolve out of it. It's kind of the philosophy of ambient music, isn't it? Well, I hope this has been useful. Like and subscribe. Remember, it's Black History Month, and so we'll be looking at a little more Ellington down the line. I've just decided I want to look at Ellington. He's one of my favorite composers. And other things, good things coming up this month. So hit the bell and you'll be notified when I do a new video, as you know. I probably will do another one tomorrow. I'll see you next time.